We see those brown boxes on our doorsteps all the time, right? We're streaming movies on its cloud, we're asking its AI about the weather. I mean, Amazon is just everywhere. But have you ever stopped to think about how it all started? How did a single, simple idea, and believe it or not, it wasn't even about selling books, how did that one idea build one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, controversial empires in the entire world? Well, let's dive in and trace that exact journey.
Yeah, that's really the core question, isn't it? And to get to the answer, we've got to go back, way back to the mid 90s. The spark that lit this whole fire, it wasn't some revolutionary product. It wasn't even a business plan. No, it was a powerful mental tool, a framework designed to avoid the one thing its creator feared more than anything else, the pain of looking back and having regrets.
And that right there is the key. I want you to hold on to that thought. It's not a business plan, it's not a product, it's a framework for making decisions. A totally different way of thinking about the future that, believe it or not, would unlock the door to the entire Amazon empire. And the story of that key? Well, it begins in a pretty surprising place: Wall Street.
All right, so let's set the scene. It's 1994. Jeff Bezos is not the guy you know today, not even close. He was a senior vice president at the super high-tech hedge fund, D.E. Shaw. You know, the kind of place filled with absolute geniuses using incredibly complex math to play the markets. He was successful, he was secure, he was on a very clear, very lucrative path. But while he was surrounded by all these complex financial models, Bezos spotted a different kind of number. And this one just stopped him dead in his tracks. Internet usage was growing at 2,300% per year. I mean, just think about that. That's not a trend. That's a full-blown tidal wave, a revolution happening right in front of his eyes. And he felt this overwhelming pull. He had to write it.
Okay, so how do you do it? How do you walk away from a stable, super high-paying job for some wild, completely uncertain idea? Well, this is where Bezos created that mental tool we talked about. He basically projected himself into the future. He imagined he was 80 years old, looking back on his life. And he asked himself a simple question: will I regret leaving Wall Street? And the answer was, probably not. But then he asked, will I regret missing the start of the internet? And that answer was a resounding absolutely yes.
Suddenly, the framework made the decision almost ridiculously easy. The internet was the place to be. And books were the perfect way in. Now, why books? Think about it. There are millions and millions of different titles, way too many for any physical store to ever stock. It was a built-in advantage that only an online store could have. And just like that, the decision was made. He quit his job and headed west.
So now we get to see how this regret minimization framework actually translates into a physical reality. And like so many of the great tech legends, the story of Amazon doesn't kick off in some fancy boardroom. Nope. It starts in a garage with a tiny team and a vision that was anything but small. You know, the reality of a startup is always messy. It's deeply human. For example, the company's first name was Cadabra Inc., as in abracadabra. Kind of clever, right? Well, it was quickly dropped after a lawyer misheard it on the phone as cadaver. Yeah, not exactly the brand you're going for. They chose Seattle strategically because it had this great pool of tech talent and a big book distributor nearby. And that crucial first bit of funding, it came from his parents. His family took this enormous gamble on their son's wild, crazy internet dream. And the pace in those first few years was just breathtaking. I mean, think about this. He's posting a job ad in '94. By July of '95, Amazon.com is live. And by 1997, it's a publicly traded company. This wasn't just about growing fast. It was a land grab. It was about establishing dominance before anyone else even knew what was happening. And by '98, when they started selling music and DVDs and rolled out that tagline, Earth's Biggest Selection, well, that was a clear shot across the bow to the entire retail world. The message was obvious. The bookstore was just chapter one. The real ambition was to sell everything. This quote from the early days tells you everything you need to know about the culture that fueled all that crazy growth. It was an intense, all-or-nothing kind of place. This wasn't just a 9-to-5 job, it was a mission. And the demands were absolutely astronomical, right from day one. But, every rocket ship story has a moment of crisis. And Amazon was about to fly head-on into a storm that would wipe out thousands, literally thousands of other internet companies. The dot-com crash. This was going to be the ultimate test. Was Amazon a real sustainable business, or was it just another tech fever dream destined to burn up on re-entry? And just like that, the market's wild enthusiasm turned into pure terror. The stock, it had peaked at over $100 a share, and then it just completely collapsed, plummeting into the single digits. Suddenly, the perception on Wall Street was that Amazon was just another one of those dot-coms, burning through cash with no path to profit and totally destined to go bankrupt like everyone else.
And look, the pressure wasn't just coming from the market in general. There was this one analyst from Lehman Brothers, a guy named Ravi Syria, who basically became Amazon's public enemy #1. He was publishing these scathing reports that called Amazon a house of cards, predicting its total collapse. And his predictions spread like wildfire, creating this very real danger of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the panic he was creating could actually cause the company to fail. So how in the world do they survive when so many others failed? Well, they had a clear 3-step survival plan. First, and this was crucial, they secured a massive war chest of cash. They raised over $600 million through these things called convertible bonds, right before the crash got really, really bad. Second, they just slammed the brakes on that whole growth at all costs mindset and pivoted to being ruthlessly efficient. And third, they doubled down on what they knew best, customer obsession. They used everyday low prices to build what they hoped would be unbreakable loyalty. And guess what? It actually worked. Just as the rest of the world was basically writing Amazon's obituary, in early 2002, they reported their first ever profitable quarter. Now look, it was a tiny profit, just a few $1,000,000, but the signal it sent was massive. This proved that Amazon wasn't just another .com. It was a real, tough, resilient business.
You know, surviving that crash didn't just save Amazon, it fundamentally changed it. The company that came out the other side was leaner, it was tougher, and it had this brand new clarity about what it really was. It was no longer just about selling things anymore. And this really gets to the core of Jeff Bezos' vision all along. He never saw Amazon as just a retailer. He always believed it was a technology company that just happened to start by selling things online. And the dot-com crash, well, it forced them to finally prove it. It forced them to invent their way out of the crisis. So how did they prove it? It's actually genius. They looked at the tools they had already built for themselves, and they turned them into products for everyone else. That incredibly powerful computing system they built to run their own website, well, that became Amazon Web Services, or AWS, which now basically powers a huge chunk of the internet. Their deep knowledge of the book industry, they channeled that into creating the Kindle. And that super sophisticated e-commerce platform they'd perfected, they opened it up to third-party sellers, creating the Amazon Marketplace. Every single one became a massive business, and they were all born from their own internal tools. And this quote right here from Bezos himself perfectly captures the thinking behind something like the Kindle. He said, "It is far better to cannibalize yourself than have someone else do it." I mean, why would a company that makes its money selling physical books create a device designed to kill them? Simple. Because Bezos knew that if they didn't do it, someone else, like Apple or Google, was going to. It was this bold, preemptive strike to control their own destiny. So you take all of these moves together, the survival, the reinvention, that relentless innovation, and it all leads to this moment, the final realization of that original, audacious vision of an everything store, a company that doesn't just sell you every product imaginable, but also sells the very infrastructure that the digital world is built on. But here's the thing. With that kind of dominance comes a whole new set of questions. When you build an empire that is so vast and so powerful, what are the consequences? What's the cost? The story of Amazon's incredible success is also undeniably a story of intense controversy. Now, whenever he was confronted with criticism about Amazon's, let's say, aggressive tactics, Bezos had a go-to response. He would frame the company's philosophy this way. Amazon, he argued, was a missionary on a righteous quest to serve the customer above all else. They weren't a mercenary, just out there chasing profits. And for Bezos, this wasn't just a way to feel good about things. It was a core business strategy. He genuinely believed that the companies that are purest in their mission are the ones that end up building the most lasting and ultimately most profitable businesses.
Okay, but That missionary zeal definitely has a sharp edge. For years, the company fought tooth and nail to avoid collecting sales tax, which gave them a huge price advantage. They used what many called predatory pricing to basically crush competitors like Diapers.com before eventually just buying them out. And internally, the culture has been described as this brutal, high-stakes gladiator culture, famously driven by Bezos's simple question mark emails that could apparently trigger absolute panic and force teams into all-night work sessions.
And so here we are, full circle. A journey that started with one guy's personal framework to minimize his own regret has resulted in a global empire that now shapes the regrets, the desires, and the daily decisions of billions of people. The Everything Store is no longer a dream. It's built. But as we've seen, the true cost of everything, well, that's a question that we are all still answering every single time we click Buy Now.